Thank you and welcome to the MarTech Unraveled podcast. This episode, we are tackling the topic of applying the lean methodology to drive efficient and effective marketing. Today, I have an amazing guest all the way from the Netherlands. His name is Rutger Katz. He's the founder of Neon Triforce, a boutique consultancy based in the Netherlands, optimizing go-to-market strategies for B2B scale-ups with annual revenues of 3 million euros. A bit of background about Rutger. He started his career in MarTech consulting after a study in neuroscience, where he would spend 13 years working with different technology and strategy consulting firms, getting a breadth of experience across marketing operations, MarTech, customer data, and go-to-market across a variety of clients, including Unilever, where he focused on social analytics. Last month, Rutger decided to go out on his own as a lean GTM operations consultant and launched Neon Triforce, a boutique consultancy focusing just on that, B2B, go-to-market strategies for B2B scale-ups. He also recently joined the MarTech Weekly as the content lead for EU and UK, where he successfully organized their first event in London, where we met. Welcome, Rutger, to the podcast.
Thank you, Fiona. Great to be here.
Thank you. Now, let's just dive into this topic. As I mentioned, we met at the MarTech World Forum in London last year in October, and I listened to you present about how you apply the lean methodology to drive efficient and effective marketing. So I'd love for you to start us off by giving us a bit of a background as to why you landed on this methodology.
Sure. So I've been a consultant for 14 years, and there's nothing more than consultants like than frameworks. So I have gone through, I think, almost every different framework that there is throughout my career.
Mm-hmm.
I've done Scaled Agile Framework, regular Agile, Scrum, Kanban, and so forth. And I tried a bunch of different ones in trying to applying them to improve marketing processes. And last year, I finally got certified in Lean.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew about the Lean, what's called Lean, the Lean startup methodology a while back, but that was mostly just focused on failing fast, failing forward. Whereas Lean in itself, I mean, it's more focused originally on factory work, right? It was designed and developed by Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that the theoretics behind it, the removal of waste and optimization mindset, the addition of looking in your customers and only creating value for your customers, but also empowering your teams. It was such a complete framework that it covered all of the challenges that I had in terms of trying to find. This is what consultants always do. They're trying to find the right hammer for every single nail they'll see, so they can apply it to it. And that is kind of what I've found in Lean. But it hasn't been used much in marketing or in sales. I've did some research on it. I found one or two people even applying it in sales. There's very little. But at the same time, it is such a good framework. And I've chatted with a couple of people on it, and they agree. They saw like, oh, wow, that's actually a good find. Even people who've already had a background in Lean because they worked in a factory for whatever reason, they thought, wow, this is actually not a bad idea, because the maturity of the B2B market, it's going away from sales at all costs, growth at all costs, to, hey, we need to become a bit more efficient, because 24, 23 were tough years for software, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So they needed to figure out, okay, how can we do more with less? It's a horrible quote, but everyone throws it out there nowadays.
Yeah.
How can we do more with less?
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of, all those things clicked together when I discovered Lean, and I was like, this is something I'm going to evangelize, something I'm going to pioneer, and here we are.
No, I love it. I love the background. Definitely doing more with less is a term that has been hammered in for the last so many years. Until, I guess people are even getting tired of it. Like, what does it even mean? But walk us through, what the lean methodology is. What are the components of it? What are the three areas that comprise the lean methodology, and how it can be applied in the do more for less?
Sure. So the three core components of it are what they call purpose, process, and people. Purpose is building the right thing, and not necessarily just software side, but it's also doing the right things in terms of experience side. So that is having the right conversations, doing the right sales outreach, and don't throw things out there just because you need to throw things out there if they don't convert or if they don't have an impact. But it is very much focused on also checking with the customer. What do they like? What do they enjoy? What warms their hearts when they see a specific piece of content? That those are the things that you need to put out. When talking with Frans Riemersma a couple of times on this framework as well, one of the things he always mentioned is for every organization, there's always a couple of populations, like 20%, which drives 80% of the business. The 2080 in that sense. So if you focus on that 20% and you do incredibly well, if you're obsessed by generating value for that 20%, you are in touch with your purpose. Your entire organization is focused on the purpose. So that is what they may usually say: building the right things, doing the right things.
Yeah.
And then second is process, and it is doing the things the right way. So this is where we turn into efficiency. This is how we look at a process across an organization, so also across a customer journey. For example, the onboarding from marketing, the first touch on a piece of content, through sales, through customer success, and keeping this customer on for a longer period of time. That in itself is a process, of course. So we want to do this as efficiently as possible. That means cutting waste, cutting items which aren't adding value, also things which you can do more efficient. What you'll see is that with every handover moment, you lose efficiency, you lose time. So process is very much focused on how can we optimize, how can we speed up things, how can we circumvent the constraints that we have on our business, whether they are technology, people, or process or even customers. How can we circumvent any constraints? And then the last one is people. People is basically, how do you enable your organization, your team, to continuously improve on these aspects, on the process, on finding the right value. Because without the team, it just falls apart. Your there's a good saying for that in Dutch. You're left to your fate. You're left to your fate that gets thrown at you.
Yeah. You're kind of left to your own devices, kind of thing.
You'll have to be left to your own devices. And the people aspect is one that's often underappreciated. Especially, I think, in sales organizations. There are a lot of people within sales that get burnt out because there's such an incredible high drive for it. So the people component is also focused on, hey, how can we not just enable our people, but how can we also make them thrive? And that doesn't mean we give them unrealistic expectations or unrealistic KPIs, but we try and make it more realistic. Because research has also found that if you are more realistic in your targets, your KPIs, then the salespeople, for instance, themselves, they're more relaxed. They also have a better mindset to engage with the customers that they're currently engaging with. So again, they can add just a little extra value, that extra experience for the customer, which makes it so much, which makes them more likable, but also a higher chance to convert basically the customers that they are currently engaging with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I wonder, out of the three components you just mentioned, I think they're super key: purpose, process, and people. Where do you find a lot of businesses get stuck or find it the hardest to implement?
It depends on the industry and the size of the company, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is that people or purpose are usually the hardest ones.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies, they are quite focused on making the most in their buck, uh, getting the most out of their investments. So they will focus in somewhat on the process. They will focus somewhat on, hey, how can we increase our conversion rate? How can we get more leads in? But they usually look at quantity, not necessarily quality, because that requires a longer focus. But I would say that um, purpose, that's something that especially scale ups in the beginning, they don't exactly know their ICP, they don't know exactly what their value is, they don't know exactly which features within their product are differentiating enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because that all happens in the customer success area, which is usually that is underappreciated with scale up. They're still focused on their growth, so it's marketing and sales focus all in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the customer success area, you can really figure out, hey, how do we actually create value for our customers to ensure that they stick around long enough that we get a return on our cost of acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And for most organizations, that means that they need to stick around for at least 2 years to paying customer. But as you scale grower, that becomes more important because that's where the most revenue is around.
Mm-hmm.
So that is about purpose, but I would also say as certain organizations, culture becomes tricky. A single CEO can ruin an organization's culture if he's experienced or he has a certain obsession or he has a certain mentality. Elon Musk is a great example in that case of he really enforces a certain culture in his organization. And that became very apparent when he joined Twitter. Now, whether that is a good enforcement or a bad enforcement, I'll leave it up for the audience to fill in. But
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that how much of an impact the boardroom has on culture. And you'll see that as organizations grow in size, I've worked with a lot of enterprises, there are plenty of enterprises which sort of, as soon as people are nothing more than a line on their Excel sheet,
Mm-hmm.
they only see them as such. They're seen as resources and not as individuals or as people. And at that point, also the people aspect, the people component becomes underappreciated, and you'll see that people are less effective in what they're doing. They're sluggish around. They'll stick around in their silos instead of collaborating with the person who's only a few doors away or a few seats away, depending on the size of your company building.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of, I hope that answers your question of also all of the aspects I called out,
Mm-hmm.
but depending on the size, it differs.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I would want to dive a little bit more into that. In terms of the purpose, for an organization to find its purpose, or to be, creating the right products, to be doing the right things, what does that look like? And is that, the process of getting to product market fit, or, where does the organization find their purpose? How do they find their purpose?
So I would always say it is a certain customer obsession. I think every founder has a sort of a dream of fixing an issue or finding a solution for a problem that their customers would have. So they're very obsessed in that sense. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a founder. They would, join an organization. It is very stressful to be a founder.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that certain obsession, but usually along the way, investors come in, or other people on the board come in. They have different focus. They have to focus on the growth,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes those things uh, collide or clash within an organization. So finding the true purpose, and that also feeds back a little bit towards the people, towards the culture,
Mm-hmm.
is that there is an obsession within the entirety of the organization. of doing something for the role. The example that they usually give in books is that they asked a cleaner of NASA at the NASA station, what is your purpose here? And he said, a regular floor mop with a regular floor mop in his hand, I'm here getting people on the moon. So he feels the purpose of the organization of why he's there. But he knows that he has a role in it, and the role is important. Sure that no one's tripping over dirty floors, that people can work efficiently. That is his purpose within that organization. So for everyone, all of the listeners, try to figure out what is your purpose in the organization you currently have, as which helps the organization reach their purpose in their problem space. As soon as you find a match between that, or as soon as you believe it, and embrace that, and if you can get there as a founder, getting your people to embrace that purpose, then you have to win culture.
Okay. So is that again, taking another step in? Is it a case of being clear about the overall vision of the organization, and then being clear as to everyone's role within the organization in playing towards the broader company purpose, company vision?
Vision is very important in that sense. I mean, if you have a vision which doesn't resonate with the people, if you don't articulate it well enough, then people just see it as a job. But I think that usually founders are very good at embracing and sharing a certain vision that makes people enthusiastic to work for them, and sometimes even work for them without pay, because money might be tight or whatever. Then you have the right purpose within your organization. When people even without pay, they still agree to work because they share the vision that you have, share the goal that you want to reach. That's it. For instance, Ocean Cleanup, right? It was a startup started by, I think, a young kid. Not sure if it was Dutch, but it could almost sound like Trump right now. It could be. I remember something of him at least being European. But he was a young kid. But the dream that he had of, getting rid of the plastics within the ocean, that was something so incredibly relatable for people that they were, it attracted people. It attracted employees. Whereas in this industry at this time, it's very tight to find a workforce, especially at least in Europe. I know that this is the case. If you have a great purpose and if you have a great culture together, you'll just attract people who would love to work. That is, I think, the goal of a great purpose.
Okay. And then if we go to the people side, I know you mentioned about being clear about KPIs and being able to set realistic KPIs. What does that look like? How can an organization do that better to ensure that the people are motivated and know the goal and have the right attitude to continue?
Yeah. There's one tool within Lean Framework which I really love, which is the Ocean Matrix. It's a matrix where you align the long-term goals, right? The 3 to 5 year goals with yearly goals, and then you align that with departmental, targets. Say you align that with individual ones, and it's sort of you can do it in an Excel. You may basically make a square with an X in the middle, and because you align the metrics or the numbers on the outside, so you as an individual would see that how targets that I have contribute to my department's targets, which then contribute to my yearly target, which then contribute in a certain way to my 5-year plan of the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a very important step to do, because once an organization celebrates vanity metrics, it goes into the wrong direction. And I've seen this happen that chief marketing officer will share certain metrics, which might be leading metrics for some, but at the same time, if you cannot align those metrics with the actual KPIs which your department should have, then what's the use of it? And as an example, I heard a discussion yesterday from like this superstar CMO. It's called Andrea Hale, and she also mentioned that a CMO should really report on the amount of revenue generate, the amount of new customers that they get in, not just on, hey, how good are our leads, or how good are our website leads, how good are our email opens.
Yeah.
It all comes back to how much customers are you actually pulling in with your messaging, with your whole your content that you have out there. So that link to the company goal is incredibly important. And I think everyone would be, a better professional if they can tell, how your actions contribute to the top line of the organization. Unfortunately, usually that is revenue. That is how we evaluate how well the organization is doing. And that might be, how many logos or how many customers, how many net revenue where you're pulling in the year through your actions. How do they?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's even another whole podcast topic.
It is
About aligning marketing metrics, attributing marketing activities to company goals. That's a whole other podcast. So yeah, we could think of planning for that one.
Yeah, but we can definitely plan for that one. Maybe we should get back to the focus that we purpose that we are here for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back, so we've talked about the three components of the lean methodology: people, process, and purpose. You've talked about the which ones you found organizations struggle to implement. So I wonder, what sort of buy-in is required to make adoption of the lean methodology possible? A lot of the time, a lack of buy-in is really one of the things that hinders the adoption of certain methodologies to improve how organizations work. So, is it the CMO, the CEO, the CFO who needs to buy in and evangelize?
Unfortunately, what you can see is that at least within B2B scale-ups, we see that CMOs are often people by a little budget or buying capability, where the entire organization benefits from this transformation, right? There are also a lot of, within that same group, high turnover rate. So CMOs stick around for 2 years, and then usually they jump up to a different challenge. You see that more and more in the market. You see the same with CROs and within scale-ups. Within large organizations, enterprises, this is usually something for someone within the operations department, or if they have a digital transformation department. They might usually have a lean task force within that organization already, but they usually focus on logistic processes, or like in health or in insurance, they're focused on their internal processes to make them as efficient as possible. Call center, for instance, is also a very good application of lean, where it has a proven, it's just proven to be effective to help more customers per minute or per individual over a day. Within the marketing department, maybe marketing sales department, or B2B, it requires some evangelization. And I would always say, it is good to have a buy-in from the CFO or CEO. The CFO would love if you're being more efficient with your marketing dollars. So it requires, some big pioneering on your side, experimentation. And that is the idea that I have as well with this is, if we talked about the SAFE framework as an example, SAFE isn't something that you do just a little bit, do it entirely. So it is a large transformation. When I look through Lean, you can take it as a large transformation, or you can also take it one step at a time. So you can do some experimentation. You don't need to be, you don't need to have a large workforce that's certified. So Lean really lends itself to an experimentational phase of the methodology and demonstrating its value before you go, further fully and get certified in multiple departments working according to. You can start small. That's always what I found with the transformations. Start small and not large, because organizations only have so much space for a transformation or a change. There are usually multiples going on within any organization. Currently, everyone is focused on AI optimization, Gen AI optimization, and that takes a lot from your population, from the employees. Did I answer it correctly, or did I fully answer your question in that sense?
I think maybe the follow on from that is, what advice would you give a CMO on how to get the necessary buy-in? And I think you also hinted a little bit on the fact that, the Lean methodology is not a huge transformation. Like, let's throw everything out and start again. Is that one of the selling points of the Lean methodology, that it's, improving on what you already have, optimizing or tweaking? And so, for a CMO who's listening to this, practically, how can they get the necessary buy-in?
So what I like about the Lean methodology more than I do about Agile and SAFE in that sense, that is very focused around metrics and KPIs, making business cases. So even as part of our certification, we have to demonstrate that, with our work, we're leading up to a certain amount of waste reduced, which we express in euros. So we can, with just a couple of weeks, we would demonstrate that through one or two fixes in the process, we would save an annual 100,000, 200,000, maybe even up to 1 million. During my own certification, which we did for the consultancy that I was part of, we found that we could save, I think, 1.6 million just from a little bit of research and calculating how much waste are we actually caused by not focusing on our renewals or not focusing on our follow-up to projects that we have with our customers. How much money are we sort of throwing out there because we're not doing any follow-up or wasting into vacations? And that basically, that can happen. It entirely depends on your organization. It entirely depends on how much waste there is within your organization. I can't see that from the outside in. You might have an inkling internally. If you ask for people, what's the longest time you have to wait for someone else to sort of finish a process step before you sort of get your feedback? You can look at, in a certain process, how long are customers waiting for a piece of feedback or a response from your side.
Yeah.
Because every time a customer waits, their customer experience goes down, but also you sort of accumulate a depth in activity that you have to cover. Quality of your work will deteriorate. And because of that, of course, again, customers will get annoyed, will churn easier or quicker. So there is a good way to find buy-in. Just look at your most inefficient process, longest waiting times, and zoom in on that and try and look through the Lean methodology, do a Kaizen, do 5 times why. Why are we doing some things in a certain way? Try and figure out the root cause of that, which might be a piece of technology, for instance. It could be. it's often the case in finance institutions or in health institutions. It might be that we hand over work between departments, which is causing a delay, which is causing miscommunications. It might be that our customer support team aren't asking the right questions during onboarding, that someone else has to follow up again, and that resource is more expensive for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of things happen in almost every organization. And marketing, sales, customer success, handover moments, they're strife with it. I know this. I've seen it. I've experienced it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just pick up the biggest one and try and uncover it, try and apply the lean framework for it, and then you'll get the buy-in because you already have the business case. You can get a business case very easily by just doing what we call guesstimates.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to estimate it exactly, but you can sort of guess, if this problem causes, a 1 hour waiting time per customer, how much does this accumulate to
Yeah.
in the end, and
Over
how much
time.
wasted dollars is that causing?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of information on LinkedIn, on Reddit, probably as well, in communities about how. An example, for instance, is the handover moment between a hand raiser in marketing and sales.
Mm-hmm.
If you improve the optimization, if you are able to get the hand raiser to a salesperson within 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
you'll improve the lead to opportunity conversion rate with 40%.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
These types of numbers accumulate, and how efficient you can get your organization up to. If every single handover moment or step or information request you send to your customer, if you optimize these, they add up to an income.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. It sounds to me like an organization needs to have a pretty good mapped out process and be able to measure, key moments in their process in order to then be able to find where the biggest leakage or biggest wastage is and then be able to zone in on that particular problem to fix.
Yeah. What we call this the value stream matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, a journey or longer process, you just cut it up and you describe every single step and you measure how long is the waiting time here internally, how much is the waiting time for the customer, how much has to be redone because the previous step didn't deliver high enough quality. And if you do that for every single step within the process, you can determine how much waste is within that process itself. And if you are able to fix that little bit of waste, and you calculate, okay, how many customers do we have over the year? How much does this waste add up to? You have your business.
Yeah. Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense and very practical, definitely very practical examples you've given us there. So I wonder if this methodology works for businesses of all sizes.
I would say it works in enterprises, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It works in medium-sized scale-ups. I would say certain theories are okay in startups, but there's so much hustle within startups. There are not a lot of well-defined and described processes in startups. They're still trying to figure out their go-to-market motions. So that causes that it's trickier for the lean methodology to sort of hang on to something, figure out, hey, how efficiently are we doing this company super efficiently? When you can figure out the next month or realize that, hey, this entire go-to-market motion is incorrect. We need to do it differently. So I wouldn't apply it for organizations that are somewhere between 0 and 3 million in ARR, just because there's too undefined processes. It's still trying to figure out. And after you reach sort of 3 to 5 million mark, usually coalesces. It usually sort of crystallizes in this is sort of the process that we're using. will change, will tweak a little bit, but the skeleton is there, right? The basics are in place.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point where we need to apply well. If you still need to figure it out, you do something like design thinking as a way to figure out, hey, how is the best way that customer, etc. There's prototyping, design thinking. There's prototyping in Lean as well, but it's for problem fixing, not for figuring out a new process.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, startup worlds, things are just a lot of moving parts. So yeah, it makes sense that it wouldn't really work very well. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I lost my train of thought for a moment there, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you do. Again, it's about optimizing on what you have, building on what you have. So yeah, startup won't make sense because you're still figuring things out, figuring out the people part, figuring out the process part. Maybe the purpose part probably maybe has been figured out at a startup stage, but definitely process and people are very.
Well, you'll see that the product market fit is often, I think, even up to 5 million ARR can still be a challenge for a lot of organizations. I would say that your product market fit and purpose that's the same thing. If you don't know exactly what you're fixing for your customers, what are you doing with your organization? Once you figure it out, then you could also expand that to your purpose, make your purpose larger in the case of your attack, an issue, a problem, and that will sort of attract certain. But that requires a good product market fit.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So as we close, to inspire our audience, on about the lean methodology, maybe you could share a case study that you have where you've encountered applying the lean methodology, or examples of some of the work you've done. You've worked extensively with different organizations, so I'm sure you've seen how this process has really improved their marketing and so on.
Unfortunately, I don't have too many numbers. I know some people applied it in sales and they got some pretty decent figures out. I don't have them top of my head right now. But there's a lot of evidence of lean in the industry. So Toyota, they were differentiating in how well they applied this framework. It's been applied very much in healthcare, logistics, factory work, and even when Toyota was, they basically solved their prospects. So they shared the entire lean framework with the other car industries in the US. And US people, they said, okay, well, we're doing it exactly like you are, but you still seem to be more efficient. Why is that? And I'm derailing a little bit. I'll come back to it. And the people in Japan, they didn't have to think about the steps. They just did it automatically. So at a certain time, when you are a lean organization, when you really become a lean organization, it becomes a part of the culture to continuously. And at that point, we really succeeded in the academy framework, getting an organization. But if we look back to proper case studies in marketing and sales, there aren't too many yet. I've applied bits and pieces. Looking backwards, I've applied bits and pieces of it when I was just being a consultant, trying to figure out, hey, how do I get customers better onboarded? So what I did, I just went to a bunch of customers and asked them, hey, how are we doing as a software supplier? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? And I asked our internal customer success consultants as well, what differentiates a good loyal customer versus one that churns? What do we see in the difference between that? And what we found was that customers need a little hand-holding. It was for a CDP event. customer data platform.
Mm-hmm.
Customers need a little hand-holding in, hey, how does the maturity for our organization look like in 3 years while we sort of encompass this piece of technology? And so I created a little bit of maturity framework for them and basically share with them, if you want to progress from 1 year to 2 year to 3 year to new maturity levels, you need to have this in place. You need to have this in place and this in place. And those were things like have a good roadmap, have a good board of different department heads that work together and getting a CDP enabled within an organization. It meant, looking at your processes, how do you implement CDP within your regular marketing process? It would also look at, hey, how are we internally upskilling our people, being more data savvy, data aware, looking and thinking about personalization, getting our content across.
Yeah.
There's a maturity in that. So that piece of maturity model that we discovered in customer success, we applied it in sales, and we also applied it in marketing. And that really helped, and I don't have the numbers for this, unfortunately, that really helped in getting customers loyal at the end. Because we already informed them beforehand, if you buy this piece of technology, great, we would love to have you on. But be aware that if you want to be successful in 2 to 3 years, you need to start working on these components right as you go. If you do not have the capability, if you do not have the engagement from your VPs, from your CEO, from your directors, whoever it is, you're probably going to be wasting your money, because it is very tricky to get an option of a piece of technology. You don't have to write building blocks in place. And that basically was, checking with your customers. Okay, what is the value that we're delivering? We're actually creating a transformation with the CDP framework. Right? We're transforming a marketing department. And we need to inform our customers of it. Because if they know it beforehand, they can prepare for it, they can adopt it. And then we found that in itself becomes a more efficient sales, more efficient marketing, because we are giving the right messages to our customers, giving the right preparations for our customers. We're guiding them in the adoption of the technology instead of just letting go, which plenty of organizations do. They'll sell a piece of software and they will like, good luck with it. We'll see you again when the renewal is up, and we'll ask you how it was. Now, you should check, at least quarterly, how can we deliver our value quicker and better with the organization. It's not entirely a case study with numbers, unfortunately, but that is, in itself, from my case, it was going through the Lean framework and looking at the process of, where are we losing our customers? Why are we losing our customers? I went down to the root causes of it, and I found a fix, tested the fix within the organization, discussed it with a couple of customers, hey, how can I help you, progress in that sense? And then implement it in such a way that it becomes part of our process. It becomes a part of, how we do our business with our customers in guiding them through the transformation. That, I feel, is sort of that encompasses the Lean methodology.
Yeah, makes sense. A bonus question for our viewers, just in terms of organizations who are looking to, adopt the Lean methodology. Where can they start? Where can they start? And maybe some resources you could advise. Yeah, maybe just leave our audience with some inspiration on where to start.
If you're asking about, if we're talking about B2B organizations, I would always look at marketing sales handover moment, because that's where a lot of optimization can take place. Because you're talking between different departments, you're talking about, there's a process in there, there will be delays, and that is a certain point when you're sort of first contact with the customer. So there's a lot of experience from your customer side to focus on for the organization. And for B2C, I think it's probably the same in looking at the customer support, customer success. Those are all often cases where you have a lot of processes which improve, where you often have large enough numbers that it sort of also makes an impact on your organization, where you also have an impact on your customer experience, influence customer loyalty. Everyone who has a bad experience at customer support or customer success, they're like, ugh, why am I even bothering with this organization? That is a very good point to start. Pick up your biggest issues, figure out what's the root cause of it, and tackle it. In terms of getting educated on lean, there's a certification for it. 3 levels really: yellow, which is just a theoretics; green, where you really start to apply it; and then the black belt, which is what I did eventually, which is where you can sort of tackle the entirety of the organization. Because while applying lean, you can just apply it within a department or you can just apply it within a process. If you're transforming an organization, that's sort of where the next level activity happens. Because then you start discussing it with boardroom members, then you start discussing it with, hey, we need a mindset in place in this boardroom. We're basically doing transformations if we change our processes, which people in this population are for or are against. How can we transform that in such a way? So that is sort of the highest level. Okay, now I can actually leanify, just made it up, leanify organization. That's something where the black belt certification is from.
Okay, great. And as we come to the conclusion of this, I would love for you to tell our viewers where to find you. I know you share a lot of content on this topic, so I would love for you to share where to find you and yeah.
Sure, I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you look for my name, Rutger Katz, there's only one of them that's easily find. That's the Dutch version of Rutger, Rutgerkatz. And the company Neon Triforce, there's only one of those in the world as well. Fortunately, look me up, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll constantly share content. Reach out to me if you'd like. You can find me at Rutger@neontriforce.com. And I love to help people get through this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rutger, for being on our podcast this episode, and we look forward to continuing conversations and following you on your different platforms. Again, it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Fiona. It was a pleasure to be here.